Well, good morning, Michael.
Good morning. How are we?
All right. Happy Friday to you.
Yes, and it's a big weekend.
It's a big weekend. I don't know if you guys can tell. We're sporting some college gear today. And what's even really scary is Michael and I are actually sporting kind of rivalries because I'm wearing University of Kentucky. He's wearing University of Louisville. But it is what it is. But big weekend, week one of college football. Really excited for that. But even more excited to be here for Experience Friday Live today. We have an amazing guest with us today that we will bring up here in a little bit. But hey, Michael, why don't you tell our listeners and the audience a little bit about why experience matters and talk about the ecosystem and all of that for us?
Exactly. The whole reason we're here, right? So we believe at Mofi, the group that's sponsoring this and the consultancy that Shawn and I work with Mofi, that experience cannot happen in a vacuum. And we talk to so many people who talk about their experience challenges. And we're talking customer experience, digital experience, employee experience, vendor experience, all those things that go into creating experiences. We hear all the time that things aren't working well, and it's because they're in silos. And so our approach to experiences is looking at an ecosystem. And so an experience ecosystem are all the touch points and the people and the interactions that come together to create this web of stuff that affects each other. So bottom line is you can't have a good customer experience if you don't have a good employee experience. You can't have a good employee experience if you don't have a good vendor experience. You can't have any of that if you don't have your leadership and culture aligned. And you can't have any of that unless you have a customer promise that everyone can get behind and use that to deliver all the experiences throughout the ecosystem. So that's a whole bunch of words to say that everything affects each other. And that's why we have such a great guest this week to be able to talk about a part of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Michael, with our listeners out there. Just a couple announcements before we jump right in. We're really excited. Again, if you did not listen to our episode of the Combustion Chronicles this week, you should get out there and listen to it. It was with author of The Experience Economy, Joe Pine. So amazing. Go out and download that. But next week, we're really excited for the podcast as we will have Dan Gingiss, Creating Remarkable Experiences. And what's really exciting is Dan's book is releasing on the day that we are dropping the podcast called The Experience Maker, which makes it even more fun because then on next Friday here on Experience Live Friday, we will have Dan Gingiss, the Experience Maker, with us at 11 a.m. to share a little bit about his book and his philosophy. So please make sure to join us next week. Go out and listen. Go out and support the podcast. We always love reviews on the podcast as well. So if you can give us some good 5-star reviews, that is awesome. We've got some amazing guests this season. As well as today, our chat is open and you can join in and leave us notes there. We will be checking on that. But I don't want to go any farther without talking about our amazing guest today. Zach Pousman is the CEO of Helpfully. His R&D firm tries to make sure companies invent the right shit. I love that. Zach is always curious to learn about people's cultures, identities, habits, and needs because all tech problems are actually people problems. So let's welcome him to the stage. There he is. Hey, Zach, how are you doing, buddy?
Good morning, guys. I'm very well. I'm sorry I don't have my college gear head to toe for you, but definitely rooting for a few different teams this weekend. So we'll just see what happens.
Yes, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it is so awesome to have you here with us. Zach and I became friends over the past couple years. And, our topic today is going to be around service and service design in particular. And, I don't know about you guys, Michael and Zach, but I just kind of feel like we're in this service crisis in America today, and it's bigger than what we realize. And I know, Michael, you and I have had some conversations around this, that it's not going to be solved in 3 months or 6 months. This is going to be a couple years now of getting this fixed. But Zach, we want to ask you, what was your motivation for getting into the service design world, and what keeps you motivated in that work today?
Yeah, I think a couple things really do brought me into the service design world. I've been thinking a lot about dangerous assumptions that companies make about the world, about themselves, about their customers, about the service that they deliver. And I learned a few years ago now, 5 or 6 years ago, about a fundamental assumption, and it was that everything that happens at a company should happen on a rectangle. Like there should be some rectangle-based experience that unfolds. And that's a little bit biased, right? Because most of the work that we do, and certainly some of the work that you guys do too, is for digital teams and the heads of digital departments, and they're working obviously on rectangles all the time. And maybe 5 years ago, I gave this talk that was called Design Beyond the Rectangle. And it was just about all the things that need to happen, that are happening, that are outside, right, of that small or large or very large rectangle that people interact on. And it really opened my eyes, I think, as just a little bit of just a fundamental bias, right, that people have and that companies have to think that everything could become digital. And I would tell you, one of the things that was really fun to learn, some team that a few different kinds of federal agencies and others, kind of Bureau of Economic Analysis team, figured out how much of the economy is digital, of the US economy. And because I work in digital and all my clients are digitally based, and we just think about, right, the digital world all the time and how influential it is, you would be surprised how low that number is. It's like, depends on how you calculate, but it's about 8 or 9% of the total GDP of the US. So wow. The digitalization and all these digital transformation efforts and all these things that are happening, right, rectangle based, it's not as big a chunk, right, of what really happens as you might think. And I just think that's like a fundamental assumption. Your house is not going to become digital, right? You're still going to live in an experienced environmental place called the home you live in. I think restaurants, right, are also in some ways digital and in some ways very not digital. I think your healthcare experiences, some parts of that can be digitized or can be put onto your rectangle. Other parts cannot and never will. And so I just think service design is the expansion of the design work that a lot of us do as we help companies invent new things and invent new shit, just to be frank. And it includes digital and IRL, and has to include the front stage and the backstage. So I just think service design is just those 4 boxes, just help you get a sense of how big of a set of questions and a set of levers, right? Also a set of opportunities, right, that we all have. Service design lets us get out of the strictly digital experiences that we need to design to think better about all of the things. So that helps us think about places and spaces which also are just under-designed, right, and under-considered by companies. Customer service, like the return flow, right, of any product or service. how does somebody get out of their contract, right? And we've all seen a lot of complaints, right, from consumers when all of these dark patterns are at play. It's easy to get a subscription. It's really hard to get out of your subscription. And those pieces, that's I just think a really good example of like why service design and why service design is so important today. Yeah, go ahead.
And I'll say, Zach, I just tried to do it myself. I just kind of went through my Apple account and looked at all the stuff that I had subscribed to that I wasn't using anymore. And started canceling. And there's another company, internet company that you used to fly with. I have been trying to get 2 accounts canceled there, and I'm going on 60 days. And it's not easy. So, right? So that's a perfect example. And I think that's a perfect example to lead into this Stoke that we asked you for, Zach. And I really love this. And Michael, you can ask some questions around this because I know this one really excites you too. That 66% of business leaders say customer experience / service design is the most important thing at their companies over price or even product performance. And a couple things to recognize around that number has doubled from 2010 to 2020, right? Michael, what's your thoughts about that? And let's have some chat around that with Zach.
So my first response to it is I'm cynical and I'm wondering if it's a bunch of bullshit. And I'm going back to Colin Shaw telling us that people say they want customer experience. They say they're doing customer service, but it's just a bunch of lip service, right? That they don't really know what they mean. So everyone's on this bandwagon to deliver experience and to take care of their customers. But what that actually means is such a spectrum, and so few people are actually doing it right. So I guess it's like, is it just a silly trend that everyone's talking about because it's the new buzzword, or is there really something to that?
I do not dispute that. I really don't. I think, like all buzzwords that catch attention, like all of life, I think things become trendy and things go in and out of style. I would say, though, that we all have the memory of a bad experience. And Shawn just gave, I think, a great example. I think we all have great examples. Anyone in the comments, right, has had a service design fail, right? Or a place where a company didn't meet expectations. And I think we've also seen moments where things feel effortless and magical in service design. And some companies are just tremendously good at that. The mouse that always hangs over Shawn's shoulder is the kind of company that cares so much about orchestrating great experiences and building and designing and carefully crafting and curating and measuring all the elements of their experiences. And it shows, right? We know it when we see it, and we know it when we experience it.
Yeah. So go ahead, Michael.
Well, so I guess my kind of, after getting past the cynicism, right, and trying to figure out what people actually mean by that is, okay, and if you go into Joe Pine's work, right, that we really aren't selling products anymore. We're selling the experience around the product. And, if that is what we're talking about, how might leaders who are trying to increase their market share, or how might leaders who are trying just to create some revenue or get better profits going, how might they start shifting to be a part of this in a real way instead of just putting lip service to it?
Well, and Michael, I want to, for those of you that do some following of my thought leadership and of Mofi's, we actually released a quick video this week of a thought leader and an innovator in healthcare, Shawn, who actually said, if experience is more than lip service, then it has to be in your top 3 priorities. So think about that, right? So from a strategic standpoint, it has to be in your top 3 priorities. Zach, what's your opinion on that?
I think that is absolutely right. Must be a top 3 element. And I would say that might also help Michael in his cynicism in the following way. I think a lot of companies want to, desire is there. And I think also a lot of, especially large enterprises, have trouble with can you, right? So the want to is a lot different. The desired outcome we seek, and the desire to play in that better space and play that role of orchestrator requires organizational commitment. It requires, I think, a top-down approach, right? Shawn just said, and I think Shawn is just right? It has to be at the C-suite, at the executive level of companies in order to make that progress, because you have to get a lot of stuff out of people's way in order to have those connections and to have that seamlessness and to build an organization, a team behind the scenes, that backstage element of service design that actually allows that to come to life, right? So a lot of digital leaders and a lot of leaders at companies broadly have a lot of trouble, and there's nobody for whom the buck stops here, right? Unless it gets to the C-suite, your chief I think chief digital officer is a great invention over the last 5 or 10 years, but I think chief experience officers matter, and they matter for that reason.
And I remember when we interviewed Blake Morgan for the podcast, whose episode came out a week or 2 ago, one of the things that stuck with me is that she was talking about the long game. That if you're the CFO who is just poring over the quarterly reports and you're trying to find some major increase in some metric in that quarterly report to justify whatever experience you're working on, customer, employee, digital, what have you, you're not going to see it. That customer experience, any kind of experience, is really playing the long game. And I think that might be hard for some of those folks in the C-suite, that, any of those companies that we want to rattle off as having exceptional experiences, that didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen in a quarter. It happened over a decade. And so, is the company truly wanting to build for a long-term strategic plan, or are they just looking for what's going to happen by year end?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, Michael, I'm going to put a poll out to LinkedIn to test this week. But where should that chief experience officer report to?
That's a good one,
because there's lots of philosophies, right?
Right.
They report. Some of them report to the chief, marketing officer or the chief digital officer. My opinion, as being one previously, to do it right, I had to report to the CEO. Because that then said, this is a priority, and that and we were delivering services, so we had to design the organization to be able to deliver great service design.
Well, then you could do a whole conversation. We could do a whole other show just on what does that org chart look like. So beyond who you report to, it's who do you have influence with, who do you play with. We hear so much about silos. I think in all the companies we've talked to, Shawn, in the past 6 months, I think there was one with an org chart that got us excited in terms of they know what they're doing. They've got it all. They've got a really great plan in place. I won't say they have all the answers, but they've had a really great plan in place on how all the experienced folks in the organization work together, instead of, experience for employees goes over here, experience for customers go over here. And even that employee experience, that's, 10 different places within the org, right? So it's not easy. Not saying it's easy, but it's possible.
Yeah. It's not easy, but yes. So Zach, what role do customer satisfaction surveys and NPS questions play in all of this when we think about service design? Because here's where my cynicism comes in. So I'm gonna bite my tongue.
Share. I have some too.
Go.
You go first.
No. Go. I want to hear from you on this one.
I'm encouraged. that companies have decided to ask questions. So the optimistic side of that is that we're getting surveyed a lot more than we used to. Let's all agree. I've received a few dozen of those across web, email, text. Any other channels that those are showing up in my life right now, in app or in service? Or yes, of course, at the end of customer service phone calls. So the channels have proliferated, right, to gather this kind of feedback. And I would say, even though I don't often think that NPS is a silver bullet. I do like that companies have decided and have commissioned and obviously spent time and effort and structure, right, to ask these questions. I think that's a net positive because it shows us that things are in motion, right? It's at least a visible sign of progress. And so when companies start asking that question frequently, something good could happen. I would say that it's the same problem of this organizational alignment, or the same problem of like what's happening backstage. The teams that receive that input are often challenged to both understand, effectively route, and take action on that stuff. I think there are challenges, obviously, that show right up. But hey, I think the world is better with more data. And so I just a fundamental belief, right? I just believe like a crappy survey is better than no survey. A crappy CSAT framework is better than no framework, because that could be an evolution, right? So that could get us to the point where the CEO says, let's make this better. Let's improve the instruments we're using, right? The survey tool we're using. Let's improve what we do, right, with the data we get. So I'm not necessarily a big proponent of NPS in specific. I just think it's nice, right, to be reductive and to be able to just drill down into a single question. But I think there are some challenges, and I think UX researchers and UX designers especially don't love that question. Just if you're going to only ask one question, is that really the question we want to ask? But that's just me, and I'm just one guy. So
and so I'll add a little bit. Yes, data is
Please.
Great. What I have always struggled with, and Michael, maybe we'll get the founder of the NPS on with us and have this discussion. I think that would be awesome.
I cannot wait for that.
It's to talk about it looking in the rearview mirror versus looking ahead, right? And if we are looking in the rearview mirror, we're going to get into a wreck. And I think that's what happens with organizations, right? Like NPS is always looking in the rearview mirror and not looking at today and what you can fix today. And there's some great companies out there. We've aligned, with a company called Happy or Not, where you can get real-time data today. You can know where it's getting fixed or needs to get fixed and go fix it immediately. So if you're going to use it, I say to people, find a mechanism to use for real-time data and a mechanism to use with NPS to look even greater.
Trailing,
because we can't keep just doing lagging, which is, we worked a lot in healthcare. That's what happens in healthcare. We're always lagging, and it's already lagging behind. So yeah. All right. And again, it's hard to get a lot in 25 minutes of the show. Here's a question for you, though, Zach, too. What trends about the service industry do we need to be paying attention to for 2022 and beyond, in your opinion?
A couple for me. I think one of them is very healthcare related. I think some of the work that we've done in the healthcare space, especially in terms of medicine, medications, pharma, providers, has been around the beyond the pill experience or beyond the procedure. So companies that are doing things that are, that core thing in a healthcare space, in that setting, you've got to think about what are the other petals of that flower. And that's just a model that we use a lot, which are, just describes all of the other parts of the experience, all the other value that could be generated, benefit, right, that a company could deliver outside of the procedure itself. So that often is a great exercise, and I think all companies should do it. They should think about, right, what is the core of the offering? What is the core thing that they do? And then how do you add the other petals of the flower that help support, reinforce, create new value for that core offering? So when you just have like the one pill in your hand, think about that as your core offering, or like you're a provider. So it's like poking and prodding people with various medical instruments. That's your core value. What are the other things you need to do in order to do that? So what kinds of education are needed? What kinds of outreach are needed? What kinds of data, right, is all of those stories and all of those petals of the flower are so important. And I just think that's a big trend, and I think it's going to continue. I will give in closing just one other fun wish, I guess, not really a trend, but it's a hope. And it is this. I honestly believe there should be like Sarbanes-Oxley level law so that we can force publicly traded company CEOs to call their own 800 number and get service through the 800 number.
Love it.
That's my service and wish. I want to see us
help that one.
Because think about this. Think about how a CEO receives the data from NPS or from other customer satisfaction from their own teams, whether that's field work and research, whether it's data. That's not personal experience. And when CEOs actually are forced to use the tools that they deliver to us and the services that they're saying this is the state of the art, and they wait on hold for 48 minutes to talk to a representative, things would change fast.
Yeah. Or their family members, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we did that within we did that within a company that I worked for. We made the through stuff, and that was a pivotal moment. Pivotal. Michael can tell you, he lives in Louisville. Things started to change drastically. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Zach, let our listeners know how to get a hold of you and Helpfully, and and then we'll close out the show and we'll be back to say bye with you, Zach.
Perfect. I'm Zach Pousman, as it says here in the channel. Helpfully.com, and then we are Helpfully Team on your various favorite social media channels. Love to interact, love to exchange ideas, push this forward. I think it's so important.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for being here, Zach. Hang out in the green room, and we'll be back to talk to you as we close up. So,
hey, go Cards.
That's right. Hey, Michael, just a couple things. Mofi.co, if you want to go out and see what we do as a experience group. You can follow me at ShawnNason.com as well. If you want to play in the experience ecosystem and look at being on Experience Friday Live with us, we would want you. You can send us an email at info@mofi.co. And as Michael said, we've had some great episodes of the Combustion Chronicles, our podcast. Come out and listen to some of those with us. As well as next week, as I mentioned, we have Dan Gingiss, the experience maker, going to be here with us. His book comes out next week. If you have not bought it, go buy it. I'm actually sitting right here. Here's my copy of it. I've read it. It's amazing. You do want to get that book. So, Michael, I guess I'll talk about football next Friday and see how our teams ended up going. But thanks so much for again today.
Yep.